All right, hello everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Comic Book Radio. Thank you for being here. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. This is episode 207, and tonight my guest is SPICER McLEROY. He is on here again. We're going to have a good conversation. SPICER wants like a 4-hour stream. Usually these shows are about an hour. So this is round 2 of 4. And we're going to be talking about writing tonight. So if you've got questions about writing, if you've got any kind of anything that you need advice on, anything you got questions about, especially in regards to comic book writing, this is the show. And specifically, I really want to talk about overcoming writer's block, which is something that I see a lot of people tend to struggle with. We'll talk a little bit about that. I don't know if SPICER has dealt with a lot of that. But we'll be talking about that, among other things. So, before I bring on SPICER, I want to remind you guys, alternacomics.com/pre-order. We got t-shirts and towels. These look beautiful. The last day to get these, May 31st. Those are the towels right there. Blood Realm, King Cryptid, Red Koi, Unit 44, Tinseltown. 2 designs for each. That's 10 towels in total. And then there's 9 t-shirts. These are all over print shirts. Premium stuff on both of these. The towels are fantastic. So if you're looking for a new towel, give it a shot. These are great towels, great t-shirts. We've got, again, King Cryptid, Blood Realm, Red Koi, Tinseltown, and Unit 44. And you can find these on alternacomics.com/pre-order. They're $25 a piece. May 31st. Last day to get yours. All right, so before I bring SPICER on, I want to say hello to those of you in the chat. We got Brian here. What's up, Brian Suddenly Old? Hope you're doing good. Cole King is here as well. What's up, Cole? Says, gonna be a great show tonight. I know you like the writing shows. So if you've got any questions, Cole, this is the show. Kelraiser, what's up, Kelraiser? Hope you're doing good. We got Rex Doom here as well. How's it going, Rex? Ravindra says, Blood Realm is majestic. Indeed. Indeed. I've never heard it described that way, but I agree. Let Rob Geronimo know. I wonder how Rob would take that. I think he would definitely, it's definitely a compliment. I wonder if he's ever heard that before about Blood Realm. That's majestic. Brian says, I got nothing tonight. I will be just chilling and listening. Well, thank you, Brian. I mean, either way. Either way. You are more than welcome to chill and listen. Appreciate it. All right. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Give him a big comic book radio welcome. This is the second appearance of Mr. SPICER McLEROY. What's up, SPICER?
What's going on? Got the bare walls behind me for all the excitement, It was on the other side, now it's on this side. So.
It'll balance out my too much going on.
Right, there you
go. Eventually I want to have like images and whatnot on the boxes too to help me out and also to, dress things up a bit. So it'll be really crazy here.
Categorize it, know what you're opening.
Yeah, because I got the alternate short boxes, and those have images on them already, but, I want to put images on the... these are all alternate books. I know some people think, like, oh, that's my whole comic collection. That's on the other side of me, and it's far smaller at this point, especially. But, yeah, and then I can blend in with the surroundings.
You just have a bunch of faces up there, like Sylvester Stallone and Rocky and all that stuff. I got to tell you, like, every... you have your shows like 5, almost 6 days a week, and me and my friend Kingsletter, we hang out in the dojo, and we're working, and we're often talking about what we're doing with our art, and he'll always get to a point where he's always like, yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do, blah blah blah, and then I'm like, you know what you need? And then I turn on that Sylvester Stallone thing whenever your show starts, and now it's like I try to like sneak it in every single time, but it's one of the greatest speeches of all time, man. I absolutely love that.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
it's great. It's a good kick in the ass.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I need one every day. So
I need one every time before I start the show. That's why I was like, let me build it in there. I need to hear this every day. What better way to do it than build it into the intro of the show?
Right.
Kill two birds with one stone.
Absolutely, man.
Because there's a tendency, I think, that we all have, that when things aren't going our way, we do want to start pointing fingers all the time. And it feels so good, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's everyone else's fault all the time.
Right.
I didn't do anything wrong. I've never done anything wrong.
Yeah. I try to do the opposite. I'm like, okay, what can I have done differently? Like,
that's
exactly. Like, with like a team or something. Like, they're like, well, so what went wrong? I was like, well, first I'm gonna look at myself. Like, how would I handle this? Like where to go, all that stuff. The last thing I'm gonna do is blame it on anybody else. Sometimes you just gotta take the heat, man.
Absolutely. Well, and even if it is ever someone else's fault, you still need to learn how to avoid putting yourself in that spot in the future.
Absolutely.
So there's always, everything's a teachable, learnable moment. But we can really end up, making ourselves so just dependent upon that victim mentality, but it gets you nowhere. And it's so much more empowering to go, wait, I actually have some capacity for change here. I can actually do something about this right now. If it didn't really go the way I was expecting it to go, well, let me assess what happened. How did that go wrong? When did things get off course? Yeah. But if everything is always someone else's fault, you're just surrendering all of your control and power to them. And then that makes me go, well, why is it that they have all the power and control and you don't?
Yeah, because that's one thing you do have control over is like what you choose to do. But I'm wondering if it's kind of like a muscle that you build up. I know for me it
mental
was definitely
toughness. It's a physical
like,
toughness.
When I was a kid, I was like, no, the dog did it, and now I'm like, no, I did it. Like that muscle to take like responsibility and stuff like that. Kind of like with like work or like going home every night and just making a step forward on the script, making a step forward on your character profiles, like even just no 0% days. Like if you can give yourself that, I think like just the iteration of those steps, whether it be like your level of responsibility or your script or whatever it is, like if you don't have that momentum, like keeping it going, you'll always like look back and be like, man, I should have started back then, or I should have, done this and I should have done that. And I hate the shoulda, wouldas. Those are the worst. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Nothing worse than that, especially it always hits you eventually. And then you go, oh man, if I had started 10 years ago when I had first talked myself out of starting, how much further along would I have been? And we always face stuff like that. But eventually you got to put your foot down and be like, no, it ends here. I'm going to start doing something. It doesn't, you don't have to be the best at it. You're not going to be the best at it right away. You're not going to maybe even ever be the best at it, but that doesn't matter. The point is that you're living life in some capacity in which you would like to live your life and do some of the things you'd like to do. You can't always get all of them done. You can't do everything all the time. Maybe you can if you have tremendous focus, but you got to do some of them.
Yeah.
So it's like the writer's block thing I was talking about earlier. It's that kind of thing of like, oh, it's the character's fault, or it's whoever I'm working with's fault, or the deadline, or the pressure, or the this or the that. You're looking all around for all these excuses to be like, this is why I can't come up with anything. This is why I can't write anything. This is why I can't get creative. And if you just stop with all of that, none of that matters. Sure, they're there. They're always going to be there. There's always going to be outside forces, having their way with your life. But if you let that happen for everything, and you never end up getting to do anything you want to do. You got to realize, okay, no, I'm going to write. I'm going to get something done. I'm going to come up with something. I'm going to, just even talk out loud about it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That brainstorm
helps a lot.
for yourself.
That helps so much. Yeah, like just
Absolutely.
walking around. Because I find like whenever I'm talking to my friends about my story, it's very easy. Just like roll off the tongue. And then whenever I'm sitting and I'm like in front of the computer or on some paper, it's really hard to get started. So like I'll just have this imaginary person in my house and I'll just be like, yeah, so I'm thinking about, doing this and this because he's doing that, but that's not actually going to work. So maybe if I do this and this, and just like, there's so many different ways to get yourself started. And like, even right now I'm like writing a script and like, I have a one line of what I want to accomplish, but I don't know what that is, but I got to keep going. And so I'll just write anything, even if it's crap, even if it's not even something I'm going to use, put it down and keep going and keep going. And it's writing, it's not writing, it's rewriting, right? Like that's the old adage. And you just go back and you go back and you go back. And that's a natural, like progression of a script. You're going to have failures. You're going to have like, oh man, that's not going to work. And you have to go back. Like I scrapped like 5 issues that were already drawn because it wasn't right. Like you got to do that. You have to do it because with comic books, more than anything else, like if your first comic book comes out and it's not good, they're going to remember your name. They're going to remember who drew it, and they're going to make sure they never buy anything else from you, or at least be very, very wary of it. And that's not where you want to like come out. So like what advice would you have like to ensure that whenever you come out with that first issue, it's going to hit? Like at least not like, culturally or anything like that, but that's a good story,
It's going to sound a little bit contradictory to what you were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is for when someone's doing their first ever thing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, whenever I hear about anybody that's doing their first ever thing, all I hear about, 90% of people who talk about the first ever comic they're making, it sounds like they gave it a tremendous amount of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're probably thinking like, well, that sounds really weird. Why would you say that's a bad thing? So what I'm saying here is that I hear everything about what they think they need to do in a story, what they need to create, the character they need to create, the story they think they need to tell because other people will like it. They want to make that impact. They want to do this. They want to do that. They don't want to, or maybe they do want to make something that's very derivative. But it's usually either or. It's going to be very derivative or it's going to be so polar opposite. It's going to be so original. No one's ever seen this before. And I never hear about what it is that they want to make. I never hear what it is about the stories and the comics and the characters and this and that, whatever, that they love. And what are they bringing into it that the stuff that they love, the stuff that really gets them all about the story that they're writing, the character they're into. It's never like this stuff. It'd be like if you describe someone that you, the person or whatever it is in the world that you care about the most, right? And you would just kind of describe them in a superficial way because you think that that's what's important to someone else. So they wouldn't necessarily really know, like if you describe your spouse or your best friend or whoever, you'd start thinking about certain things that maybe this is why maybe other people would like them too. Instead of like going deep into it. Why do they mean something to you? Why were they there for you in your life that meant something? When was the moment you knew you were in love? When was the moment you knew this person was your best friend? When was all these touchstone moments, all these deeper things? It gets very superficial, I think, when people start going into it and they just start thinking about all the things because it's very cerebral at that point. Nothing's coming from the heart, and people confuse it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, I think. Go with your heart when it comes to storytelling. Go with what it is that really matters to you.
Absolutely.
What is it that you love about characters? What is it that you love about the character that you're making, the story you're making? Why does it mean something to you? Is this emotionally getting you involved? If it's a horror story, does it kind of scare you?
Right. Yeah.
If it's humor and comedy in there, do you actually... Are you laughing at the stuff you're making? Is this funny to you? And if it's dramatic, is it pulling all the right strings? Because there's all these moments that I find they're getting too in their own head about it, and they're trying to do something. And I think we all are there. I definitely was there when I was starting off creating. But once I realized that after doing it long enough and seeing other people create long enough, I was like, the things that I'm into and that mean something to me because emotionally it resonates. You know, it might be like, oh, yeah, that was a great plot, or that's a great whatever. Mm-hmm. But if the character doesn't resonate with me, if the story, there's no emotional punch, if there's nothing like that that's deeper, that hits you on a deeper level, you enjoy it and go, oh, yeah, it was good. And that's it. You move on. But everything that we care about, everyone we care about in our lives, like deeply, they mean something to us. It's not just like, oh, yeah, why is that person your best friend? Well, you know, they're smart and stuff, and they're funny, and, you know, they do these things pretty good. They got a good job, you know. Like, that's bullshit. That's you know, it's like, yeah, that's very nice. But billions of people can probably meet those qualifications. Yeah. Why does this person mean something to you? You know, and that's what you got to find. What's the heart of your story? What's the heart of your character? And I think sometimes it's an uncomfortable subject sometimes, I think, for people to even explain, because they feel like, well, that's really personal. But that's what you got to do. And if it's not hitting that for you, it's not going to hit that for anybody else.
Yeah, if the story's not sincere, no one else is going to feel it. Like, if it's like, oh, I wrote it because people are into this, or I wrote this because I think this is what my audience wants, that's exactly what they're going to read, regardless of what words you use, you know? And so, like, I decided whenever I was making my own comic book, I was like, okay, I'm going, regardless if anyone buys this, I'm just going to entertain myself, and, like, the goal is just to be better than the last issue. And that's it, you know? Like, I feel like what you said last time when we were pressing refresh on that campaign, it's like, you know, if it's more important that you love to do this. Like, you would do this no matter what. You would do this on stone. You would do it on a tree. You would do it on a cave wall. Like, you know, like that type of passion. And whenever you put, like, I love whenever you add these things, like, what do you love about this character? And it makes me, like, rethink how I can illustrate that to my audience and drive that through. But I would say for me, like, my story is mainly about, like, fatherhood and about, like, being a son and being a father in many different, like, relationships, right? And I think that's mainly who our audience is, right? Is, like, fathers around our age, or at least adult males is usually the audience. And so that type of stuff, like, resonates with them, and it resonates with me too whenever I see a movie or I see, like, a father lose their family. Like, dude, every single time, you know, like, I'm just like, you know, and it always hits there for me. And I guess that's like and so I try to put that into the story, you know. And before, like, when you're first writing, you're just, like, trying to think of cool things, and then you finally realize, like, it's not put together, you know. Like, I try to make sure, like, within the script, like, everything has to deal with everything, you know. Like, you think of Star Wars, like, Luke Skywalker, the people that are taking care of him are related to his family. The guy that's in the desert, the mysterious guy, directly associated with his father, you know. Like, the Princess Leia's his sister, you know. Like, you know, spoiler alert if y'all didn't know that, but like, how incredibly over-connected everything is. And then that way, like, you don't have to make so many of these characters. Like, they're all, like, directly related in some way.
Well, that's how you take a huge, tremendous scope of a story and make it smaller. Mm-hmm. You know, so you can have this cosmic story, but if you're going to focus on a few core characters and really, you know, give a bit of their, not just their family tree, but their friends, the things that matter to them, whatever that is, you can make that story smaller. Sometimes people take the big cosmic story, and then it's like, and then it's just on this world and that world, and this huge ship against that ship, and there's a space battle and this and that. And I'm like, that's good and all, but there's no plot to get in the way of the story.
Yeah.
You know, where's your character development? who are we following on this journey? You know, a spaceship that's going to fire some stuff at the other spaceship. Is that the character? You know what I mean? Where's the heart? Where's the humanity? Where's the thing that's going to resonate with people? You know, and that's what I want to hear about. You know, so you can have all these fantastical other things, and those things are great, and those things definitely make the story more interesting. But you still got to have that core.
Yeah, like whenever you were describing like King Cryptid, and you were talking about like, oh, I got like 100 stories I could do. Like, obviously you haven't written all those yet, but you obviously have lots of experience. It's like, yeah, I can write 100 stories based on this character, but like,
I got like 50 ideas written down. So.
Oh, okay, there you go. So do you like write out like paragraphs, like sentences?
Yeah,
like,
it's about a paragraph.
Think of like, yeah, like trying to like other people that don't even know how to start comics, you know, or start a script. Like I always say, like just 2 sentences, and then expand that out to a paragraph, and then expand that out to like 3 paragraphs. So that way, you have the elevator pitch, and if they ask a question, you can expand, and if they ask more questions, then you can expand more. Like from a pitch perspective, I see a lot of people they go on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah, you kind of just have like the quick gist of, you know, what's going on in this issue, what's the setup, what's the situation, you know, and then you have the deeper, okay, here's who's involved, here's where they are, here's what's going on, and then you can expand upon that, you know. So I got a lot of the 1 or 2 sentence things of like, oh, here's an idea for an issue, and then I got a bunch of here's a fully fleshed out paragraph with story beats and what kind of characters are going to be involved, what time or when and where it's going to be taking place. And then I can kind of look at a lot of that and pull even a couple different things and rearrange what issues I want to tell and when, because I'm like, oh, that would be good for here. Because especially in an ongoing series, you want to make sure you're not just every issue is the same issue. Yeah, you know, and that could be a tendency to do that, of like every single issue is like beat for beat, the same things are happening. You know, especially when you're starting. Yeah, it's like you're getting so stuck in the world building phase of setup that it's like, okay, you got all these toys now. You know, you're on issue 20. Could something happen other than just like, and then now he meets this character? Yeah, okay. You know, but what's occurring? What's the conflict that's there? What are the motivations of each character? Why is that individual, like in King Cryptid's case, like why is he in this area meeting this character, or why is this character in that area meeting him? What are they after? What are they trying to get or prevent? And then there's always a third party. There's always a third party. You know, whether they're hinted at or they're actively involved, there always is a third party. So in the story, you really got to make sure you're having them mentioned as well, and then you're building on these series of events. If everything just keeps on becoming like, you know, it's over and over again your first day of school, it's going to feel weird. If everything's just like, okay, and now this person is that person, and they're over there, and you're over here. Okay, that's great. You know, that's not much of a story.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's why for me with an ongoing series, I really love seeing people develop around a character or characters.
Yeah.
And what it is that they're doing, what it is that they're after, what means something to them, and who is trying to either get in the way of that, or who is trying to help them along the way. And that's kind of it. And then you can make a million different stories out of that and have it in all kinds of different situations and in different settings and with different other characters. And as you build up more characters, you build up more plots and more situations that arise, and you bring back other characters, you know, out of nowhere sometime, have it in a fun way, and just all of a sudden they're in there too. So I never understand when people are like, oh, I have my story and I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well, how many issues? They're like, I'm on 3 issues. I'm like, man.
What?
You know? Give me like, you know, if you're on like issue 300, I'll cut you some slack.
Right.
But if you're on like issue 3, and I've dealt with this directly maybe 3 or 4 times as a publisher, where I'm talking to someone and they're burnt out by issue 3 with stories. They don't know what to do anymore with the character. They had these 3 stories in them to tell, and then that was it. And I'm thinking, like, if you've achieved an objective, if you just set out to tell a specific story, like a vignette sort of thing, I get it totally. But if you kind of went in guns blazing, this is an ongoing series and all this other stuff, and all these characters, and then you issue 3, you're burnt out.
Yeah, right.
All I could think is like, I don't know if you know your story or your characters.
Yeah, like I try to have like just to get things started, I try to think of like a person-to-person conflict. So your good guy and your bad guy, right? And then you have your earthly conflict, which is like, what does, the earth's like in trouble or whatever. And then there's like a heavenly conflict. And so it would be like kind of like there's this
you got a hierarchy of conflicts,
right? Yeah. And like, but all of them meet in the middle. All of them are looking for the exact same thing, because if they're all looking for different things, it feels like a very disjointed kind of like story, because I feel like a story should be like very, very connected. Like even the words that you're using should be carried through like the issue to drive home the point of this of the story that you're writing. But like what would you say to someone who's like I want to get into writing, for me personally, I would suggest like just write short stories, and
that's a great place to start there,
you know.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Start with the very stereotypical traditional 3-act structure. Start with that kind of a thing where you have your setup, you have your, going back to Star Wars again, you kind of have your setup of everything that's going on, and then you have your second act where everything goes to hell and takes a bad turn, and the third act where you have the resolution involved, and the characters that started off in the beginning are somewhat changed through the course of events, And you could do that with a quick 3-pager if you wanted to on a short story, just very, very small level situation.
Right.
But definitely trying out short stories and things like that when you're starting off is great. Someone who's starting off, I don't know why I've seen it happen a lot, but I don't know why anyone would want to go into it creating comics for the first time and say, well, I want to tell a 30-issue series.
Yeah. No, that's not good, bro. That's not good. Yeah, like I even suggest like, well, what's your favorite movie? And it's like, oh, my favorite movie is this. So like, well, then write it just like that, but with different characters and different dialogue, but it's the same like progression of like what's going on, so you can kind of understand. Because like if you're a painter and you want to be a master painter, you repaint master painters. When you're in that learning phase and you don't really know why things are the way they are or what works the way it works, that's huge. That's absolutely important. And same thing too with artists that want to draw comics, sequential pages especially. Check out some of your favorite comics, redraw that comic. And I don't mean trace it, I don't mean just like referentially try to get the artist style, but do it in your own style. You don't want to Xerox it or anything?
And then redraw that comic panel for panel in that page, in that whole story.
Yeah.
When you're learning, it's a really helpful tool, because you're going to start learning through osmosis. You're going to start picking up things of how panels and compositions flow. Certain angles, certain shots, certain things that all of a sudden you're going to, as you're drawing them, because the learning's in the doing.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I could say this, you could look at it from someone else, you could, read the comics, whatever, but until you do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not going to sink in. And it will. It'll be like magic. You'll all of a sudden start doing it, and you'll be like, oh, that's incredible. That's why that is like that.
Yeah, right? Yeah, because I was doing that. I was like studying like pages and how like I read The Walking Dead all the way through. Like as soon as I got like the first omnibus, then I read everything else, and I started noticing patterns, and I started observing how I react to like what's going on, like or like that, like going through all these emotions, and then I was like, and it's happening a lot. I'm like, how are they doing that? You know, like I'm going through like, what's going on here? And then it's like, oh, it's the dopamine hit of the page turn. Like you're setting up that mystery, and you're setting up
Oh,
that
yeah,
mystery
yeah.
so that when you flip it over, the resolution is there. You know, and that's like super satisfying every time someone flips a page. But yeah, I was reading Manga in Theory and Practice by, was it Hirohiko Araki? He did JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so, like you said, you know, pretty much you read all of the writing books, it's pretty much the exact same. And I would agree. I've read a lot of different ones. But this one, like, really just put it into 4 words that I could, like, I had to read the whole book to kind of understand what those 4 words meant. But it was like introduce, development, twist, and then resolve it. And then that is always going to keep your reader interested. Every single issue. And then with you, it was just like, you got to make sure something happens at the end of that comic book. Because if it, like, the worst thing is, like, even with the Marvel movies, like, it felt like you're in the middle, you're in Act 2, you know, instead of like, oh, that was a complete movie, or that was a complete comic book, or a complete experience that I just had.
Yeah. By the time you're done with an issue or whatever it may be, you really want to make sure that people have learned something about the characters, the world around them, and that the plot, if there's an overall ongoing kind of plot, that it's thickening. You know, if you have this kind of thing where everyone is just kind of where they are, they meet, they do their thing, they whatever, they part ways, and then that's about it, and you didn't learn anything deeper, you know, you have no idea if these two will meet again, and if they do, are they going to get along, or are they not, or, you know, you're left with this middle of the conversation, you know, like all of a sudden no one says goodbye and whatever like that. You're gone. You know, everything's an Irish goodbye, and all of a sudden you're like, where'd they go?
Right.
You know, and then that's the end of the issue.
Right.
And there's there's only like maybe a handful of things that have told stories like that, and every one of them I can only think worked when it was on Adult Swim.
Right.
Like, you know, I'm thinking like Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Oh yeah. Just
15
so that's kind
minute
of like
episode.
what you expect.
And then, yeah, and you know, sometimes mid sentence the episode stops.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but
Or
it's
Monty
like
Python, the credits would roll at like the very beginning of the show.
yeah, you know, and again, that's used for comedic effect, obviously, and then that's the tone. But if your tone is like an adventure story,
Yeah.
or something, you know, there's a seriousness to it, and you're kind of doing that.
Yeah.
That's gonna piss a lot of people off.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, how do you like how much of your intuition do you just rely on, like whenever you're writing? Because I feel like a lot of people will start writing and they'll feel like it's bad, or they don't trust their judgment, and that's the reason they're running into a blocker. You know, like if like for me, if I'm running into, I just write something down, however bad it is, and I think about it as I'm going to sleep. And usually by the next day, my subconscious is like giving me at least another step to take forward. Like, do you have anything like that? Like some people, to teach people to trust their own, like, I don't know, wavelength or vibration, whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, there's times every single instance where I have some kind of development or a potential turning point in the story, and there are always forks in the road.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes, generally, the two forks are we going to not see this character past this issue, or are we going to see this character down the line? And then of those two forks, there's a bunch of little other branches and more forks down the road. But so every single time I'm like with a certain character, because you want to make sure if you're going to see that character again down the line, don't do things that feel like they're finite and that this character is done or dead or yada, you know, because if you do that one too many times, like, you really want to be sparingly
with
with that kind of thing. you're going to start really making your readers feel like you're just constantly trying to out-clever them and subvert expectations and do all this, And by doing that over and over again, all you're doing is becoming, you're creating a pattern that's more and more predictable. So you're really ruining the emotional punchline every single time with these characters. So whenever there's things that are being done with certain characters, I'm like, well, if I do that to them, I got to make sure that if we're seeing them again, that this is going to play out. So if I'm doing something extreme to a character, I really got to make sure, am I prepared to carry that out? Because if I'm going to walk that back the next time we see this character, I got to really have some good excuse for walking it back and an even better story as to what the hell happened. Because, this looked like that was it, and now we're seeing this character again. And how is that possible? So if you just go like, well, hey, it's a made-up story. That's how it's possible. As soon as I've seen so many creators do that. This is fiction. Anything can happen. It's a comic book, whatever. And as soon as that happens, I'm like, you know what? Not for me.
Right, yeah.
Not for me.
You gotta have
you
at
do
least
you.
that much care. Yeah, it's like lazy writing or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, you can't be doing that, man. Yeah, because it's gonna feel like you only want to pull that trick out once, like something that big where someone died and now they're back. It's like it's kind of like with now whenever you see someone die in Marvel, you're like, yeah, whatever. They're gonna be back. They're gonna be back some universe in some way, somehow, someplace. Even when they killed Batman, I was like, he's not dead. He's not dead. And that kind of like cheapens like whenever they killed Superman. I remember that was huge. Like I remember like you could get comics literally anywhere of that issue where Superman died, and then after that it kind of became like a thing that they would just do to like revitalize sales again. But then they would flip it on you and just bring some other universe with a Superman in, and you can't do that to your audience. It's like the beginning of the end. Yeah. If you're writing that, you're writing that and not your story, and that's definitely not good. Definitely not
because the only time within King Cryptid there's if there's a death, it either stays, or if it doesn't stay, there's an explanation as to why, and we're going to be understanding more about the world and the character and the magic of the world throughout the course of the series. But otherwise, when a lot of characters, it's not going to be every single character. There's I'm thinking about there's two that seem to occur within issues 5 to 9, and the reason that those things occur is to lead into more stories down the road, and to also be like, oh, so this is a thing that can happen now, but it can't always happen.
Yeah,
and it's very specific to this instance, to this character, to this circumstance, whatever it may be, But to keep on kind of knocking on death's door, and then you cheapen it every single time when you just create this MacGuffin out of it, and you're just like, hey, well, we did this, and but we didn't really do it. We just kind of did it to twist, out of a certain situation.
Right.
And that's something to really try to avoid. I got a question here from, let's see, Unstable Molecules. How's it going? It says, Pete, do you have any advice for how to manage trying to juggle too many concepts at once? Do you mean too many concepts within the same story, or do you mean too many concepts like you have too many ideas going on and you don't know which one to choose?
Well, I know unstable, and I'm going to say the latter.
Yeah. The latter. Too many ideas?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a hierarchy of importance? What's really tugging at you? What's really going, work on me. Come on, work on me. Don't you want to make sure that you tell this story and this character, and because there's always one of them. It's just sometimes we tell that one to shut up. sometimes there's good reasons to tell that one to shut up because you're already committed to another project or whatever's going on. But if you're in an ideal situation where you're able to pick what you want to do now, and you have many ideas to choose from, but there's always that one that's nagging away, saying, this is the one, this is the one. Going back to what you were talking about, listening to your instincts, to your gut, go with that. Even if you think like, but is that trendy? Will that be, will anyone like that? It doesn't matter. If that's the one that you feel like, I need to tell that one right now, that one needs to get done, I strongly suggest doing that and pursuing that path. If you don't, all the other avenues you pursue are going to suffer from you wishing you did the other thing. And because of that, you're just going to end up you're going to do all that work on the other stuff. It's going to not be as good as you wish it was, because it always goes that way. And then you're going to go back to the other thing, and you're going to lose all that time you could have just focused on, or money sometimes too, depending on that extent. So yeah.
What
about you? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I would agree. If I have too many ideas going on, I would definitely prioritize it. See which one speaks to me the most. And just because I chose that one doesn't mean that maybe I was wrong, and then I can go somewhere else. But I don't mean to be indecisive. I mean to this wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And this other one's bugging me a little bit, or even just making a step, like I said before, just one step, every single day, write one line down, one sentence down, one word down, just something to kind of get you closer to even the proxy end, where it's like, okay, well, this is the end, but it's not really the end. It's just like my proxy story, which I'm going to refine until it gets to the final story. But yeah, too many projects. I'm really lazy, and so I'll just choose one. And then I'll just permanently forget about the others. They'll be like, what was that story? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's, I don't know. I've always been more inclined to just focus on the one thing. Mm-hmm. So I've never dealt too many times with, having all these ideas and then just go with it. Mm-hmm. And I'll have a ton of ideas, like with King Cryptid, we were talking about that before, with all these different issue ideas and story ideas and character ideas for that world, for that title, with that character. That for me is it's still easy to say, okay, well, that's what I want to tell next. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like having all these ideas for like this completely separate story, this completely separate character, I haven't run too many times into that situation. I usually find a way that whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm already setting myself up to tell a multitude of stories. So it's like a pure anthology kind of thing, with like a bunch of different stories thematically, or maybe not thematically sometimes, and I find a way to rework it thematically. Or it'll be like King Cryptid, where it's episodic and there's almost like an anthological feel to it, issue to issue, where I'm telling these different stories. That's not necessarily one gigantic story and broken down into parts, but more just like, here's a day in the life, and then here's the next day, or a week later, or a month later, or this or that, and this is kind of cherry picking the best moments and the best scenes and the best things to talk about. Because I think if that's another thing too, that I find that some people, when they're talking about their projects, and I've stressed this over and over again on this show and on open mics and all the other kind of stuff, a lot of people are, and I drill the Alterna guys into the ground with this type of stuff. Don't be so precious.
Yeah.
Don't be so coy. Not every damn detail in your story is a spoiler, nor is it important and vital to only be discovered as you read it. You can talk about probably, I'd say, 70% of your story without ruining a second of it. And if anything, I would argue that you're adding more intrigue, because some people go, well, I just want them to read it. I don't like talking about it.
Oh God!
And I'm like, they're never gonna want to read it if you never talk about it. If you don't show, they don't like some. I've met creators who don't want to even show a preview page. They don't want to show a panel, just the cover, and like the little, the log line, a couple sentences for the issue.
I mean, you wouldn't even get that in a comic book store. Like, you're gonna pick it up, you're gonna look at the cover, flip, maybe even go all the way to the end, and then decide if you want to get it or not. Like,
yeah.
That's, I mean, just because it's on the computer doesn't make it any different. I mean, I can understand giving the whole comic away free. You don't want to do that, but at least the first 5 pages. Like, if I can't get past the first 5 pages, I probably am not going to enjoy the rest of it.
Oh yeah. And I would even say that the older I've gotten, the less forgiving I've gotten. If I can't get past the first 2 panels. I know I don't want to read more than that. I give you 2 panels. Like when I see submissions, or when I used to look at a lot of submissions, I'd say 8 pages for the benefit of the doubt. So I can kind of, see where someone is headed. But I know within 2 panels reading something, do I want to continue with this? Yeah. And if I'm like, I'll continue. If it's like that, okay. So I'll keep going on. But after 2 panels, I'll see certain things, and I'm like, nope, I'm out. I'm out. I don't care what the hell you're telling 10 pages from now. I've seen that you already have no idea how to open up a story. I can see that the way that you're writing is either unbelievably pretentious, or it's so ham-fisted that I can't get past it. Right. Or I can see that, especially over the course of 8 pages, but you get the 2 panels and they'll keep you interested. But then over the course of the 8 pages, I see other things that may arise. Like over 8 pages, if you haven't even had one character name pop up in 8 pages.
Right. Yeah, that's not good.
and it's like, some people, they might think like, what do you, no one does that, Pete. Are you kidding me? Half of the submissions I've received, within 8 pages, there's not a character name mentioned. Wow. It's baffling, because again, it's people that are living with the story for so long that they're not aware that you are telling the story. You're communicating that to someone else. So they're sitting there with, like, they know the name and they know everything and they know what happened before, and they know, so they know so much of it. They're failing to communicate. That I don't know any of that. The reader wouldn't know any of that. So you got to make sure you're telling that, and you can do a little exposition. I like to see a balance of that, of course. But you got to make sure. I had a great conversation with Andy and Dennis yesterday about exposition and what to draw out and whatnot. And there's a lot of different things that people will draw out that they shouldn't, and things that they should that they don't. And so you get into the exposition part of it, and certain people will live by the extreme words of show, don't tell. And it's like, oh, you want to show everything. You don't want to tell them. You don't have any exposition, and oh, man, that's when you're going to limit your tools as a storyteller. You're going to limit the scope of your story, and you're going to limit the immersion of your story. If everything you want to have is show, don't tell. Now, I understand not being redundant. Don't show and tell at the same exact time, what's happening. Don't be, you got a character leaning back with a punch, and you're like, he leaned back with a mighty punch. Like, I get that. But you want to make sure you're showing and telling in a different way, where you're showing what's happening in the story while you're telling the story too. You can't just do this whole thing where you figure every single thing will be drawn out. So if we're going to have anything that could have been exposition, anything that could have been world building to just set up the scene or the character or whatever, no, that'll all be drawn out.
Yeah, it's an extra 10 pages.
An extra 10 pages.
No biggie.
Hold on. I got to tell the 20-page origin to this situation.
Yeah.
Before I get into the character. And then I got to tell the 5 pages of how that character got to where they were Not just that they showed up. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I gotta show them walking. The reader won't know that they got there. Yeah,
Right?
the reader will know. The reader will know because they're there.
Right?
And then through the course of conversation and other elements that you could tell during the story, you'll understand why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll automatically, if the reader is intelligent enough, which you should always assume they are,
Right?
they'll be like, oh, they got there because they walked, they flew, they did this, they did that. You know, that's going to be the last thing on their mind. You know,
Mm-hmm.
boggling, you know, into the minutia of every single element is death for a storyteller. You gotta let things breathe.
Yeah, no one wants to go through all that. Like, that's more lore than story, you know? Like, but what you were talking about, like showing and telling, I was reading the new Conans that were coming out, and it was literally like it was a book with images, and I was like, what are you doing? You're telling me about how cold it is, and he's walking through the snow. Like, I don't need to know that, you know? Like, so I'm like flipping. I'm like,
give me something else. Like, I love
the
my biggest rule. It's like this stupid catchphrase I have inside my own head is juxtaposition, exposition. So if I'm doing exposition, it has to juxtapose what's happening. You know, if you have something happening where the character's walking through a blizzard or something, and you're going to put exposition, don't talk about the damn blizzard. Don't talk about how cold it is. Don't talk about these other things, these other events that are occurring. Maybe what's on the character's mind. Maybe how it parallels something, you know, that is either has already happened or is setting up something that's going to happen. But the last thing you should do is just be doing like descriptive writing on the visual.
Yeah. I learned that. Well, I learned very quickly how expensive every single word is that you put in a comic book, because you don't have a lot of space, you know, to like put like lines and lines and lines and lines and lines of stuff. So like every word is like $1 million that you're about to put into the story, and it's got to make sure that everything has to connect, the entire story. Because if you're talking about pizza and at the end he eats a hamburger, but on the next issue he eats a pizza, then it's like, well, were you talking about that in the last issue if he's not doing that this issue? So, exposition. I also thought about that as well, like where if you're going to show everything, it's going to cost way, way more, and it might even drag everything out. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to use exposition. I was like, well, it's not the way to approach it, you know. Like whenever someone says it's this way or it's that way, I always say, well, that's a very Sith way of thinking, you know, very absolute, you know, like it's either this or it's that. And it's like with writing, you have so many tools, you need to bring them in, like even shadows, even silhouettes, like can tell a story. And then, but I love that juxtaposition, exposition. I like that. That's really, really good.
Yeah, and it'll help you to keep things more on the track of making sure that your exposition adds to the story. It doesn't just, you know, repeat what is being shown, you know, which detracts from the story and then makes it a very expensive story to produce, because you're going to find that you're not actually getting anywhere, because you keep on. You got two tools to use. Large, you know, the biggest ones you can use in comics is the art and the writing.
Yeah.
So if both are playing up the same angle, that's a waste.
Yeah.
You know, you let your art do one job and let the writing do the other. If they both do the same thing at the same time, oh man. You know, you're going to, as a creator, just logistically, you're going to bloat the budget. And then also you're going to create a story that feels like it is dragging, because as a writer, especially, you know, an artist too, but the writer is more keen, I think, at least from my experience, to help dictate the pace.
Yeah.
Because especially like you should be understanding that certain things need to be emphasized, and, you know, the push and pull of how you're telling that story. And the artist should understand that too, but sometimes the writer will override that. And then, you know, if you're talking about corporate comics level, or if you're working with an editor, hopefully they have the wherewithal to not make sure that you know, you're ruining the whole thing. but your pacing is dictated largely by your panels and page turn. So if you're not utilizing those things effectively, that's going to be a massive train wreck.
Yeah.
As far as pacing is concerned.
Yeah, because they're going to get those page flips and it's going to be like, oh, okay, another page. Like, man, whenever I realized the page flip, I was like, I can't believe how I've been reading comics since I was a kid, and I just finally figured out why some comics really hit with me and some really didn't. Like do you have, like, you had like a exposition, juxtaposition? Do you have anything like that for subtext? Like
for subtext, I don't know if I got anything that rhymes.
Oh man, I'm not gonna remember it.
I guess the only thing that you could say, because this is what's really important about subtext, is the context of subtext. So does this subtext that's happening, does what's the context of it? Does it matter to this larger story, or to the smaller story, I should say, that's being told here? Because that happens a lot of the time too, where I'm like, I can see that thematically they're trying to tie something together. Yeah. That none of that played out over the course of the story. So I'm just thinking, like, what are you doing? You're running parallel instead of running and intersecting at various moments. So you have your theme going this way and the other things going that way, and they're never actually joined up. Right. And that can be a really difficult thing to have those two things tie together and hit. But when you do thematically have these things, and I find that people are not thinking about themes as much anymore with their writing.
Yeah.
Like the larger resonance of what the characters are doing, why they're doing what they're doing, and how that story is playing out. The overall point of the story. So, if you have you were talking about your story before earlier about, fathers and things like that, so a familial tie. Now, if your whole story is about a father, and then at the end, it more just focuses on a friend, or a mother or whatever, if you're not tying it in something specific, you can take everyone everywhere, all over the place.
Yeah. But
you got to tie it back together at the end. And if you don't do that, and it turns into this other thing that you might think, well, that's like kind of, it sort of rhymes a bit, it doesn't stick the landing. It just doesn't. So you got to make sure that if you're having, like, I have an issue of King Cryptid, I don't want to spoil anything, but it kind of has like this familial tie to it, and about mentors and about fathers and about all these other things, and about the relationship that can occur between here's what happens when you have a loving father, and then here's what happens when you have a destructive, abusive father, and you see it play out. And you see the parallel that's there, but the theme is tied together with that fatherly kind of vibe, But if you don't have that kind of tie, and it's not really being thematically played out, I feel like everything just ends up missing the mark. And you might think it's hitting the mark, but it'll feel disjointed. It'll feel like you're telling two separate stories, and it'll feel like you don't really know. You know the characters now less at the end than you thought you did at the beginning, because you're gonna leave the reader so confused because nothing stuck. Yeah.
It's God, I had a question for you just right then. Whenever you're saying that, and I lost it. Dang it. I forgot it. I'm sorry, Pete.
All right. Hopefully it comes back.
Yeah, hopefully it does.
But if you guys have questions in the chat about writing tonight, let us know. This is a writing discussion.
Oh yeah.
So whether it's plot, character, structure, even logistically, like we were talking about before. I see a lot of creators that they'll bloat out the story.
Oh yeah.
Add and then I'll look at it. especially when I got submissions in. We don't do submissions anymore, only for it came out on a Wednesday. But I get so many submissions in, and I'm like, the first 8 pages here, you could have told this in 3 pages.
Yeah.
You didn't need to drag this on and use up basically what's like a third of your book. You could have reduced it by 5 pages. So now think about the money you saved on the budget, the time to create, and you made your story hit that much harder, that much faster, and you still accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish in the 8 pages. You did it in 3. And I don't know if that's a symptom of like the decompressed storytelling that's become so prevalent in modern everything, not just comics. But I love when it's a story that it doesn't rush to the point, but it makes no qualms about getting there. There's no detours.
Yeah, because I wrote my first one kind of like a movie or a book or something, and then I tried to page it out, and it was like, oh, this thing's gonna be like 90 pages. I'm like, that's ridiculous. That's just no one can afford that. I mean, for like issue 1, what are you, crazy? And
more importantly, it's like, can you afford to make that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's crazy. That's so many pages. But yeah, so now I just like put like, okay, well, each issue is going to be 30 pages, so I'm just going to put that down, and then I'll write the story. And if it goes past, I'll be like, okay, well, where do I need to edit? What's really, really, really important here that I it's kind of like you're sculpting marble. It's all about what you're taking away, not what you're adding to it. And whenever you've taken away as much as you can, that's kind of like where it should be. It shouldn't have all this like fluff and all this other stuff around it. But yeah, like writing out page 1, page 2, page 3, and then making sure that like a lesson I learned is like, if you put "and" whenever you're doing a description, that's a totally different panel. If you want something, like, so I would have to write it out like P01 and then write out what's happening and then write the dialogue and make sure it's not too much. And then it's just so many things that you got to really, really pay attention to. But it's not something you need to do from the very, very beginning. You can take your time getting there. You can just know you're going to have that rough draft, and it's going to be again and again and again and again. And that's where like the love of your character is going to drive you through, like the world and the story. That's going to keep you there. It's like, you know what? I don't care how many times this takes. I'm just going to do it until it's great, at least to me. And I enjoy it. Makes me laugh, makes me cry, makes me excited when I wanted that to happen,
Yeah, and I think a good way to get to the core of what it is you want to tell in terms of your story is just start writing down what it is that matters to you in terms of the characters that you want to portray, good and bad, all the different traits that they have, describe them. And then especially really describe the themes you want to touch upon.
Yeah.
So once you get all your characters and you got a bunch of, the themes of things you want to touch upon, all of a sudden you're going to start realizing, I could tell this kind of story, I could tell that kind of story. It's going to start piecing together by itself.
Yeah. Because there's one thing, we have a friend, Raph, and his first question was like, all right, so what's the theme of this? Like, that was always his first question. It's like, what are you trying to say? Not like, what is this guy doing? Like, what are you, he may be doing something. He's doing that to tell the moral of the story or pass on, knowledge or wisdom or a cautionary tale, something like that. Like, what's the theme? What are you really writing about? Because just a series of events maybe it's cool, maybe it's, who knows? But like, if there's no overall meaning or overall like theme for you to like sink your teeth into, it feels very paper thin.
Yeah.
After you've watched it,
You got to have your theme, your focus of the story is like the sun in your solar system, and everything else is spinning around it,
Right.
So if you don't have that, it's going to become real easy to go off on tangents constantly and start telling kind of like a meaningless, rambling story. And it's also going to be easy to create something where people don't feel invested in it. And they read it and they go, yeah, but I don't really know what I read and I don't really care about it because you didn't have anything that was a centralized focus and a theme. And it could be something as vague as saying love is the theme of this one.
Yeah,
Danger is the theme of this one. You could just pick explosive words just to use, or then you could expound and be more clever upon it. In abuse of power, you could talk about, self-fulfilling prophecy. You could have all these different sort of cliched tropes, but within the context of the stories that you're using and telling, they're going to feel fresh, they're going to feel new, but they're also going to feel familiar, which is really important because a lot of people emphasize so much on originality to the point that they start telling and focusing on different stories and characters that the reason it's original is because it's horrible.
Right. Yeah.
The reason no one's ever done that before is because it's bad.
Yeah, because it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
A24, all right? It's like what's the difference between an art film and a good film? An art film doesn't have a good plot or a story. That's the only thing. Nothing's resolved. It's just like stuff happening.
It's just people existing.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
Man. I've seen a lot of those movies, and I'm like, what am I watching, dude? What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real bad.
That's like the pretentiousness of that people can go down with the storytelling of like, oh, I'm so clever. I did a whole 90-minute film. It just we're going to the bathroom for 90 minutes.
Right. It was great.
Okay.
It was the shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, like having that theme is a good barometer as well. It's like, okay, is what I'm writing about have to deal with this? Even with like the 2-sentence, the paragraph and the 3 paragraphs, you can be like, well, I don't know what it is. You can just go back to those 2 sentences. It's like a good foundation for you to continue going on and like making sure you're not going on those tangents and all of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, too, is that eventually you start, like if it is an ongoing series, it's a lot easier to write something that's one and done. Mm-hmm. Because you can have a lot more fun with it, keeping the story close and tight, and that's it. Done, and then you can do whatever you want to do because you don't have to worry about the consequences and ramifications for these characters. So if you want to do something extreme, just make sure it plays out within that story. When it's done, it's done. But when you have a story that's an ongoing and you have a lot of different issues that you want to tell and a lot of different stories using this world and these characters, once you start really assessing what exactly the themes are and what these characters are like, what this place is like, all these different things that you want to accomplish and the different motivations of these characters and what they want to do, the stories start writing themselves. Yeah. That's why I never understand when people are like, oh, I got writer's block, and I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm in issue 3 and the blah, 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 and I don't know what to write anymore. And I'm like, you don't know what it is to write anymore because you don't know what it is you're writing about.
Yeah.
And that's the real problem. It's not about like, oh, how do I come up with a plot for this character now? It's like, well, what is this character like? What's their personality? What are they doing? What are they inclined to do? How do they react to situations? You have to have all these different things because it's like good acting too. Good acting, most of it is just good reacting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I try to get like a character sheet and put down like their favorite food. Like something that people can grab onto. Like something just normal. But like their favorite color. What was the funnest time in their life? What was the worst time in their life? Like even those small little questions, like what do they like to do besides what they're doing in the comic book? That just adds that little bit of like believability to the character.
Yeah. What's their temperament like?
Even? Yeah. Like how do they react to certain situations? If someone stole his food, how would your character react? Like that, knowing your characters that deeply, it's very easy to, like you said, put them in a situation, and now you are reacting to that situation as the character, and it starts flowing. But,
absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you avoid all the problems that seem to happen so often in modern storytelling, where everything feels like it's either a diary entry, or that it's you're all these characters are just avatars for the person who's writing the story.
Oh yeah. God, I can't see that.
And they're not thinking about putting their headspace into the character. They're thinking about the character is me. And it's like, no, the character is not you.
Right.
The character is the character. The character might be an extension of you. The character
Mm-hmm.
might be a polar opposite of your viewpoint on something.
Mm-hmm.
But the character is the character. And what the character is doing, that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't go like, well, that's not something that I would do. Yeah, because you're not the character.
Right. It's hard for me to be mean in comics, though. It's like when I need the villain to be mean, I'm like, okay, so we're gonna do this.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Like,
really?
I have a lot of fun with Victor Lugo, because Victor Lugo is he's just a cold-hearted, ruthless piece of crap, and it's fun.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm too nice sometimes. I'm just like, oh, can we resolve this peacefully? No, just
It's a little cathartic.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's part of it. You know, you got to have these characters. Some of them are going to be more measured than others. Some of them are going to have these different kinds of inclinations to react in a certain way. And if you don't understand how they would react, and you don't understand why they would react a certain way, you have to go back to the drawing board. You got to go back to the basics. It's not about moving forward at that point. It's you didn't do enough work at the foundational level. So of course you're building this house of cards because you're flying at the seat of your pants. You don't know what the hell you're doing. So when you're now out of those two plots that you just stuck some characters in, because that's really what happened.
Yeah.
You didn't build the world or the plot around the character. It happened the other way around. And that's when people get stuck. Because the more stories you tell, the more you got to go, oh crap, if I don't know my characters, I'm going to get really caught up in telling stories that make no sense. Because it's easy to do that on the one and dones. You know, when you just have the plot as the focus and your characters, who really cares? They're treated kind of like cookie cutters that just go through the motions of the plot. You know, and that happens when something's really plot driven and it's not really going to continue. But if you're going to have a character that's constantly there and you don't know about how this character would behave, you're going to find that as soon as your plots that seem to all be the same anyway, because let's face it, that's the only reason you're writing it with one character in mind. As soon as that ends and you think that the plot defines the character's identity, you're going to be stuck because there's only going to be so many situations you could put them in if you don't actually know why they would be any of these situations to begin with.
Yeah, and definitely like psychology, psychiatry, like, and especially how people react with their faces, because it's usually what you're going to see in a comic book, so you can make sure that you get that across. But that will absolutely help you write to react, to the situation, because it's like if you don't know how people react, then your characters are not going to be characters. They're just going to be things on the page, like how angry people act, how jealous people act, how, and we've all either perceived people like that or have experienced people like that. And it is fascinating to get into that type of like mindset where you're like, why is this person always like always looking to grab everything, being super greedy? It's like, oh, well, most likely, when they were younger, they didn't have a lot, and they went through some type of trauma or some type of thing that happened that taught them, hey, I have to steal to survive. And so that's the reason, that they're doing that. And so that's like an entire story.
It really is. Yeah, you just made a whole story right there.
Yeah. It's easy to do that, kind of like if you can understand how people will react, or at least have some empathy or sympathy. But one thing I don't like to have sympathy for is a villain. Like, what do you like? I know it's like a lot of like modern writing, it's sympathy for the devil. And like for me, I'm like, no, this guy is evil. There's nothing. I don't care what made him evil. For me,
unless you plan on redeeming the character,
right.
Don't make the reader feel bad for them.
Yeah.
So unless they're on a redemption arc, then what are you doing giving them redeemable qualities?
Yeah. Yeah, like the gray zone for a villain. I'm like,
and it doesn't mean like it always makes me think of like Mumra in Thundercats, how he's got Marmot, and and there's like this one scene when Marmot's like going towards Mumra and like kind of nuzzling him, And Mumra's like, I love you too, Mama, in my own way, and it's like that's not necessarily making sympathy for the villain as much as it's showing another layer.
Yeah.
And there's two different things, because now it's not like, well, I don't want Mumra to get his ass kicked because he's got a dog he likes.
Right? Yeah.
You know?
How's he gonna feed it if he's all beaten up? Yeah.
But it gives you like this little layer into these characters, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want the villains to be like mustache twirling, like I'm so evil because I was born that way. That gets a little tiresome too, because then you can only do so much. You write yourself into a corner. But you got to give them some kind of reasonable understanding of why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
And understand not to harp on making them into this sympathetic character where you want the reader to. And again, it boils down to if you understand psychology or how to write for a character.
Yeah.
Because you'll then know, like, okay, I'm leaning heavy on this, and this should not be this way because I don't want readers feeling bad for the character. I just want to throw in this oddball layer into this character.
Right.
So
where'd you learn your psychiatry in terms of how to write? Because for me, it's just like interacting with a bunch of people and just.
I think it's everything. I think it's everything. It's I'm an observer of people.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
And and I'm always kind of like self-assessing. So between that and then reading and then getting into all different kinds of various interests in terms of like subject matter.
Yeah.
So like that's always helped, and all the subject matter that I've always been interested in is very polarizing. So it's interesting to see like the different personalities that come into play to comment on these subjects, So like that has really helped to offer or at least inform how I shape a lot of characters and whatnot. But I find that books on philosophy and psychology will help you out way more with your writing than a book about writing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And writing will teach you more than reading a book about writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because if you read one book about writing, it really is like you've read them all. They're all going to 95% say the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's really about, and you don't want to make sure that you commit too hard to that too, because then all of a sudden you're going to have this formulaic thing going on where everything becomes the same sort of story over and over again. But we got a couple really good questions here, so let's get to them. Cole says, for you, what's the difference between something being a trope or homage and being derivative or a ripoff of something else?
See, a trope or homage and being derivative or a ripoff of something else. I guess the sincerity of it, like a gun-wielding hero is a trope, but they did John Wick with him, like they did. There's always, you can take a trope and put a twist on it, and now it's not a trope anymore, but then homage, I don't know, I don't like, maybe I'm in the minority, but I don't like homage covers. I don't like taking some old cover and then putting in.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We did a couple of those when we were in the dark distribution days of Diamond,
right?
Because retailers will order more of those, which is just so like,
Yeah.
So it became like, all right, yeah, we'll do that, But it was always just in my gut feeling was, don't do that. That's horrible, And so at this point, I actually told the Alterna guys last week. I was like, I don't think I've had this problem with any of you guys, but just I keep forgetting to say this. No homage covers. Let's make covers so iconic that other people want to homage them instead.
Yeah. Yeah, if I see another Todd McFarlane Spawn Spider-Man thing where he's like crouching and there's all the webs, if I see another one of those, man, I'm just like, come on, guys, y'all got such great talent when you can't think of something else. It's
I hear you, 100%. But as far as for me, the difference between something being a trope. Tropes are going to exist whether you intend to have them exist or not.
Yeah, like cliches.
They're they're the way they are for a reason. Because they resonate. They're almost like a universal law at this point.
Yeah, right.
You just can't escape it. It's like a force of gravity. So you're just going to have stories that go towards that for some of them. Now, your whole story probably won't be a trope. Your character probably won't just be purely a trope. Let's hope not. If they are purely just these things, then you haven't developed them enough. But it's a good way to start. And then, as Spicer was saying, you can kind of put a little bit of a twist on it. You can layer them. You can do all kinds of different things that beef up and build up on that trope, as instead of it just relying upon that. Because as soon as you start relying on things to be, well, that's a trope. This is how it is in this genre. This is how this story is told. How it's always been told. It turns into, well, then why are you making it? If it's already been done to death, why are you bothering? You should be wanting to do something that you feel like this is something that I haven't really seen done before, and I have always been wanting to see it be done this way.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between that inclination to say that I want to see it done this way, so I'm going to do it, than there is to say I want this thing to be this way because I don't think anyone's ever done it, and that's why I'm doing it, for pure spite, to make it original, and that's it. It's a fine line, but there is a difference. One of them, your heart's in it. The other one, it isn't. As far as something being a derivative or a ripoff of something else,
I think there's no way to avoid that. I mean,
that's really tough, but you want to make sure you are never on the nose.
Yeah.
I would always say that at least if you can't pull out at least 5 or more influences out of that character or this story or whatever it is, then it is too on the nose. So if you're looking at a character and you're like, that's totally Batman or that's Spider-Man,
right.
You just kind of switch the costume, or but they're doing like a Spidey pose and they're flying through the city on a line, and you know what I mean. Now you could say Spider-Man. Well, Spider-Man's just like Tarzan, but in the city, in terms of like how he's reacting.
Right.
Okay, yeah, but there's a whole hell of a lot of difference between Spider-Man and Tarzan, or Batman's the Shadow. Yeah, but there's a lot of difference still between Batman and the Shadow, or Zorro and Batman. So there's still enough that has changed that you're not going, well, that's just an on-the-nose ripoff. So there's a big difference between something that you can see the inspiration or the influence and something that you could say, well, that person just made that, slapped a new coat of paint on it, called it their own, and is now trying to tell me that is their own original character. But that's a good question, Cole.
Yeah, I think if the trope is the resolution of the story, then it's a really bad trope. If like everything's based on that trope, then that's different. But yeah, like
man.
Yeah, but if you can just find a twist, you're golden. Like, you just find that twist. That's really the only element that you really need to find, because everything else has been done a million times in a million different ways. There's really not a lot of unique ideas, and when the unique ideas, especially in storytelling, come out, they're more often dissatisfactory than not.
Yeah. And I mean, I would even say that don't think too much about trying to out clever anyone.
Yes.
If you want to make a big character and they're strong and they're stereotypical in all the ways that a big, strong character would be, then do that. Because the worst thing that you could do, if you feel comfortable writing that character, if you all of a sudden say, well, I'm going to make this character, but like they're huge, but like they're weak, and they're really all these other things that normally these characters aren't, you're going to find yourself really struggling to write that character in an authentic way that is fun for you or rings true for you, and that's going to show itself real clearly in the story. So you're better off writing a character that you feel like, yeah, but there's a lot of characters that are like that. Okay, well, find ways to make your character not exactly like that. And that's really all you got to do. But you don't have to, because I see people do that a lot, where they try to get too in their own head about it, where they're like, oh, well, that character, this and that, and there's characters that are kind of like that, and But, well, is your character just like those characters? Because then if it's just like those characters, yes, you got a point. You got to keep on working on that character, developing them. But if they're not just like them and they only have a passing resemblance, you can go back from the start of storytelling.
Right.
And you're going to have characters
That's like that. That's like that. That looks like that. That's,
yeah.
He did that. He did that. The Simpsons did it. Like they've done everything. You can't really do anything new with that. But
exactly.
But yeah, and I would say like, even if it is a trope, finish the story, man.
Oh, like for the love of God,
finish it,
yes.
Please finish it. Like I think like a lot of people are like, oh, I wonder if it's this, and I'm like, no, just finish it. Like, have you ever written a story? Have you ever published? Then write a story, man. Like you're gonna have to write hundreds of stories before you even get to one that's like gonna be good. Like I've been writing stories since I was, like 7 years old. Very, 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 very badly up until recently, but like I had to go through all that so I could look at my old stuff and be like, oh, that's what I did wrong. And you can really see like those mistakes with work that you've done compared to when you did it right. It's like night and day. It's like, oh, this is the reason it worked. And if you don't know why it worked, then you just go back to the basics of storytelling, and it'll definitely be in there for you.
Oh yeah, yeah. And especially too, if you're gonna have the story end, give it a definitive end if you want. It doesn't have to result in the death of characters or anything like that. But there's a conclusion to the story, and it's okay if it logically concludes. If anything, I would encourage that it does in some way, shape, or form logically conclude.
Please.
But if you're going to continue on to the next issue, the next part, the next whatever, conclude the story that you just told, and set up what's to come. That's it. Don't end it in the middle of the conversation. Don't end it like oh well, this is the thing that's going to happen next, so we're just going to let you hang here and wonder what's happening. That kind of cliffhanger element, I know people like to do it, but I love a cliffhanger that's a setup when it comes to something where you're going to get into the next issue, as opposed to like the Batman Adam West kind of thing, and then they were good with it because it was the next night. Because time matters too. If you're going to put out this issue and it's coming out next month, you can get away with the whole they're trapped, they're up against the foe. Tune into the next issue, see how the fight plays out. But if you're going to have that story come out in a year, 2, 3, 4, and it's like the end with squaring off with the big battle 4 years later, it's like.
Look, he threw a punch.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be the most anticlimactic opening.
Yeah.
That you thought at the time, this is going to be so cool. They're going to be like, oh my God, how's it going to play out? Okay, well, first of all, it's probably going to play out with the main character surviving.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So because that's the interesting part about the whole way that they did it back then, is that it's not like, oh, are Batman and Robin going to die? No, it's like, how are they going to get out of it? Because they're going to. So you got to make sure you got something. How are they going to get out of this situation? What's going to happen? But so that's why I would always suggest it's better to end it, have the big fight, play it out, set up the next thing to come. Whether it's like the villain that's scheming, or whether it's, them kind of going off to where they have to get to for the next part. Have some kind of resolution and then set up for the next thing to come. Because otherwise, man, like, you are setting yourself up for a lot of really just pissed off people, that especially if like that's leading to the climax, like the big battle was supposed to be the climax of that sort of thing, and then you didn't do it. You gotta wait till the next one.
In 6 months you'll figure it out
if you're lucky.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, hell, there's been some series where like that never happens. Like the book got canceled. Yeah. So it's like they leave you, and you're just, you got the equivalent of comic book blue balls. Right. So you're just sitting there like, is that ever going to happen?
Yeah. It was like, why'd I even read this thing? I should have read the next issue. That would have been better.
Yeah. Exactly. Comics for Life says, hey, Pete, Spicer, don't know if you touched on it, but I always feel you should know how a story should end. What's your take on that?
It depends on what kind of writer you are. There's I've heard like there's an architect writer and then there's a gardener. And so an architect is going to plan absolutely everything down to the T. And then a gardener will just go through and just create it as he writes, right? There's some value in that because you're kind of like the reader as well, where you don't know what's going to happen, but you better be a damn good writer. A really good writer to just go off and just riff on that type of thing. But I do find a whole lot of value in knowing how this thing's going to end because you can kind of scope it backwards that way, or even like, hey, these are the cool things that I want to happen, and figure out how to put those things together. Like you might not even have the end, but that definitely shouldn't stop you from writing. Just write.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about an issue, yeah, you should absolutely know how that's going to end. If we're talking about if you're going to work on something that you think is going to be an ongoing and one day it will have an end after however many years, however many issues, I would say that it's somewhat important, but not as important as making sure that there is some kind of journey that the characters are going on and development that's taking place as opposed to the destination that, you know, wherever it is that they're getting to, or if a character's dying, or because that's what it's going to be for a lot of them. It's going to be that they either end up at a certain spot and then that's it and the story is done, or they're dead. and that's kind of how that's going to end out, you know. So when you're telling a story that's a big, long, you know, many years in the making sort of thing, it's more important that, you know, are you comfortable and aware that you're going to need to take these characters on some kind of transformational journey? Right. Is there a redemption arc at play? Is there some kind of, if there isn't, like, let's say you have a character that is already pretty much developed and the whole world will develop around them. There's a lot of other characters that are going to go through different arcs and whatnot, but their character arc is done. They're going to be the way that they are. So you really got to figure out at that point, well, what is the point and purpose of why they're doing what they're doing, and how are they impacting the lives of these other characters or the environment that they're in. So there's a lot of different things to figure out. It's not like I don't think it's a steadfast, tried and true type thing where it's going to apply to every situation. But, you know, it's issue to issue. Yeah, you got to know, how's this thing going to end? What kind of resolution are we going to come to?
Yeah. There was a manga I was reading, Goblin Slayer, and it was kind of like what you were saying, where he was as good as he's going to be. You know, like he's never going to get like better at whatever, but he had like 5 characters around him, right? And then they were all progressing and they were all doing something. So it doesn't actually have to be your character. It could even, like you said, be the world is developing around this character that doesn't really change. But I did, personally, for me, I want to see a transformation of a character from, you know, like Luke Skywalker. You know, he wants to leave his leave to go be a rebel, and then he finds out that rebel's not really everything he wishes it could be, and he wishes he would actually go back to a simple life. You know, like that's kind of like his sweet spot that in the beginning of the story he's trying to get out of as much as possible, which sends him on a road of trials and tribulations and threshold guardians and all of that to get all the way back to where he was with all the tools and capabilities that he needs to control that world at the same time. But yeah, that type of, like, I'm very rarely interested about a character that's just awesome and is going to stay awesome the entire time. You know, I like to see, because that was one thing with my first time writing, was like I had this huge monster at the end of it, and I was like, well, like, this is like 5 issues in, he's got this huge thing, like I'm going straight to the top, and like there's so much meat on that bone that I can not only, I'm not drawing it out to draw it out, but I'm like introducing you to this character, and they're always going up and they're always going forward, you know, like the challenges are raising, their powers are raising, all that stuff. And that has been like the most satisfying for me to kind of create those stories in those situations, because for me, I kind of want to know how he deals with a smaller situation before he deals with a huge situation, so I have something to compare. And it's like you said, you can't betray the character. Like how he handled that small situation most likely should be the way he handles the larger situation that's at hand, right? Because that way you have the consistency of character, and the consistency of that personality. But,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With me on King Cryptid, because of the fact that he's essentially an immortal, he's been around for like 500 years. He's got a lot of stuff that he's already done and been through. So I have a lot of flashback type stories to play with, which I love being able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them will just open up, it's a flashback. Some of them it'll be like he's talking to someone else and it's a flashback that's a story of him talking to the person about the story. But there's things moving forward with the character that it's going to feel like the illusion of change, because he's going to go through a lot of different things. He's going to have some things that he realizes, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe, you know, I was wrong to let that go that way. I kind of was self-righteous about it, or I felt like maybe that was the right thing to do, but in the long run, it really wasn't. You know, there's all these different things that are going to develop with him, but it doesn't change the core of who he is or what he feels his purpose is, because he's already identified that years ago. But we're going to see some of those stories of how did he come to solidify who he is. So we'll see that throughout the course of the series. So his character development kind of like does like a bit of a stutter step every now and then, where it feels like, depending upon the issue, if we go back and do a flashback, it'll be like, oh shit, like that's how he was. You know, that's how he handled that situation, and I see how he handles this now. You know, so there'll be issues like that that run parallel with, you know, so you can get to see through the course of events of what he's been through. He's learned through that, and he's had a lot of time to learn. So sometimes you'll seem like this character that, oh wow, he's just so wise and knows it all, but it's like you're gonna see moments where it's like the reason he seems wise at some points is because he's been through so much that he made mistakes with. You know, so that's really important. To have characters go through things, to have them make mistakes, so you can show them learning, you can show them progressing. If they don't really ever have those experiences, if everything is just this, you know, well, they're great because I said so, or they do these things because, you know, hey, they're the star of the book, why wouldn't they be awesome? You know, if that's the way it becomes, man, you've got to really have a compelling set of supporting characters,
right? Because
that could sink real fast. That could become like a very insufferable experience.
Insufferable character.
Yeah. So King Cryptid, because of his lifespan and his longevity, and he's gone through so much loss as well, his character arc is like this big, long kind of curve, whereas like a lot of other characters will have these really fast, kind of, you know, fast-moving, comparatively speaking, kind of curves. So you'll see some characters develop a lot faster or go through things a lot quicker. And whether they learn anything from it or not, it depends upon the character and the situation, because some of them are going to learn the wrong lessons out of things, and they're going to stick to those lessons.
Yeah, because if your character's not making any mistakes, not learning from anything, then it's kind of like, I don't know what they call it, like a Mary Sue, where they're just perfect and like they'll never learn anything, and that's kind of like a stale character to rest everything on top of, you know.
Totally, and then that becomes a trope where that character exists to just try to make the other characters look bad. You know, and then you start realizing that you're writing stories to just undermine your own character development. And now you're left with like two insufferable layers of characters. You got the Mary Sue type characters, and you got the other characters that you just constantly are beating up, you know, and telling everybody how much they suck. So it just becomes this insufferable level of story. That's why
Yeah.
I know some people they like to go in there and kind of parody the Mary Sue type character. I say get the hell as far away from that as possible in any way, shape, or form. Don't even bother parodying it. That trope should be just dead as a doornail. Don't even bother.
Right.
But it should only live in like a meme on the internet.
Right.
Comics for Life says, how hard is it for you to try to not to let another character take over the story? Example, Wolverine. It depends. Sometimes I'm more than comfortable with letting another character take over. There's going to be definitely a bunch of issues of King Cryptid where it's going to feel like King Cryptid is a supporting character in his own series.
Yeah.
But that's because to effectively build not just the world and the characters around him, but to even build up King Cryptid and use him in a maximal kind of way, you want to make sure that you use him minimally too. So you want to make sure that it's not just always King Cryptid's front and center 24/7 all the time, every single plot, every single thing, it all revolves around him always. Because then it's going to become overexposure. And I know you're probably thinking but he's in it, it's its own series. But you're going to run out of stories to tell because every single thing is always just going to be about King Cryptid's reaction to everyone else. And you're never going to be able to develop everyone else. And you're never going to be able to give a crap about why anyone else is even there to begin with because everything is just going to be King Cryptid, King Cryptid, King Cryptid. So it's really important, I think, a lot of the time to have the character take a step back. Don't have them disappear from the book, but have the other characters get a chance to shine, to develop, to make mistakes, to do their own thing. And then this way you can actually have King Cryptid in there or the main character, whoever it might be in your story, and have them, now with the reader knowing more about these other characters, have them interact. And it makes the experience even better.
Yeah, I had a character in the comic that we were doing. It was this sheriff character, and the artist Bob Raymond, he just drew him so damn cool, just so cool. Every single time, every shot, he just looked so damn cool. I was like, well, I'm gonna have to put this guy in here a little bit more, because I was enjoying it, and he was a character that I created for me to enjoy anyway. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just kind of lean into this because the comic artist is having a great time drawing him. And it's like listening to your intuition, kind of like what we were saying in the beginning. It's like you don't want to be stuck on anything. You want to have rules, but you don't want to be stuck so hard in the mud about every single decision because you might be missing out on something else that could make you even a happier and even more fulfilled creator. But again, you're going to have to make a mistake on following your intuition because you're going to think your intuition's telling you something and it was wrong, but now you know what that feeling is. Like, oh, I thought my intuition would, but it actually wasn't. It was telling me to go this way. And I don't know, I always get little sparks. I don't know how you get it, but I'm like, no, I shouldn't do that. Oh, we should go this way. Oh, let's do that. Whenever I'm writing, and the more I overthink what my mind is telling me, the more blocks I run into.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, overthinking all of it. That's like rule number one. Don't do that. That's instant writer's block. And if you do start overthinking it, write it down. Write down everything that you're thinking about, and then there's clarity in either hearing yourself say these things out loud or writing them down. If they're all just swimming around in your head, what happens is they just bounce around everywhere, and they just sound worse and worse. And then you're demoralized from that inner monologue you're having, and you don't want to do anything then. So just get it out of there.
Yeah. And definitely respect, respect the ability that you're able to pull a thought out from nowhere and bring it down from whatever universe or parallel dimension that it comes from, and you're able to put it down on a piece of paper. I think we're the only ones that are able to do that, to take an idea and draw it down. That is magic. That's power,
Oh yeah,
definitely, respect that as you're writing, and I don't know, for me, it kind of inspires me and keeps me going, keeps me focused. Like, hey, this is a privilege. This is like something amazing. I'm not just writing words. I'm bringing ideas into life.
Yeah.
Like the far out thinking that I have that I don't believe, but it's just really cool to think about. It's like you're writing King Cryptid, somewhere out there, a universe has been made with King Cryptid in it. You know? And like if you write something against that universe in your story, that's whenever it's not rolling right. That's when it's not feeling right. And so like when I'm writing my book, I'm like, okay, well, here's this world, and I can't go against this world that's already been created because there's these rules.
It's like the never-ending story.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I always had that thought. And I was like, yeah, it has to fit within that world. I can't just suddenly make changes to it because I don't want to figure out how to resolve this. You know.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And something else I'll say too, Comics for Life, something that you're referencing here where a character, you know, like Wolverine or whatever, would it's a very popular character, and they'll put that character into the story to hopefully spark some sales and interest in that story for something that's maybe floundering. I find that sometimes it's done really interestingly, and that could be great. But a lot of the times I think it's done poorly because it just becomes the story focusing on the character that's already popular. Mm-hmm. The character that's popular is there to put butts in the seats. Now, once that you're there, you got the book, you got the attention of the reader. Now you got to let that other character have a chance to shine. That character, Wolverine, in this instance, would be guest starring in their book. So if you don't do that, and then you just let them take over, well, no one's going to care still about that character. That they're just going to pay attention to the fact that Wolverine was in the issue, and then they won't look at the next one because Wolverine's not there.
Yeah,
and this character that he was there with still is a crap character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like they don't want Wolverine; they want a better writer.
Exactly. Yeah. So but what I'm talking about when I'll let another character take over the issue for a second, that's on purpose. Mm-hmm. It's not to undermine another character or to have like some kind of sales boost. It's there for the story and the character, and this is how we're telling it because it's important to do it this way. Because otherwise, if we don't, it's not going to be as impactful. Any moment with this character is not going to be as impactful in the future because I didn't do the proper setup. I didn't do the proper emotional resonance in the story. It'll just be like, it's the equivalent of, you watch a drama or an adventure, and a character that you really you appreciate, you really fall in love with, and then they die, something bad happens to them, whatever it is, and you're like, oh my Lord, and it's like a hero sacrifice type death, and it hits you. Now, if that character just came on scene to just jump in front of whoever and take the bullet, and you didn't do anything with this character, they just did that, you'd be like, oh, that sucks that happened, but whatever.
Right.
It's it feels maybe mean to say that, but we'll see it even happen to be really brutally, morbid in real life. Celebrity deaths affect people differently than the average death of whoever.
Yeah.
Because
the attachment that you
an emotional attachment. Yeah,
and even the other way, it works the other way. Instead of the heroes making you cry, like when a villain dies, you're like, yeah, when
they get their comeuppance,
from Game of Thrones, whenever they poison that Kid King, I was like, yeah, I was so happy he was dead. Oh, so happy. But yeah, even that, it's just like, hey, you got to build that up. That can't just be tossed in there at any time,
Yeah.
And because I have some of those sacrificial lambs along the way as well, but they aren't like there for the issue to die. They're there for the story, and the story needs them to die.
Yeah. Even hell, think about Star Trek with the red shirts and everything.
Yeah.
Like if one of the main people are biting it, you're like, oh my God, what? But it's like, oh, it's just that dude. I don't even know who he is.
Yeah. It's basically to establish that the enemy's powerful.
Because yeah,
those people. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's not the death of the character that's impactful. It's the loss of the future stories and everything that came before. So if you had nothing before, you have nothing to look forward to in the future with this character. So if they pass or they get killed it's like, okay, sucks. Whatever. As long as that dude that I like didn't get killed, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Cole says, I think it's good to have an idea of where you'd like to end up, but you don't want to handcuff yourself to an ending that doesn't make sense for the characters in your story. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Every time I've written a story like, okay, so this is what's going to happen, it never happens that way. Like I definitely have an ending that I want, but it's never the ending that I originally intended. And that's not a failure. That's not I need to try it again or anything. It's just, this is where the story ends up. A lot of these things are more like promises to yourself than the actual story. It's like, yeah, I'm promising myself I'm at least going to finish this thing, and then I'm going to rewrite it. And like every time you do that, it's kind of like a little bit more of a promise to keep going and keep going and keep going. So yeah, just fail as many times as you can. Like, try writing it without an ending. Try writing it only with the ending. It's like you're going to sculpt or paint something or create some type of art. You're going to try it in a different way with a different point of view and a different style with a different color scheme. And those are all things that you can do with a story, and it's only going to make you a better writer. Because if I was only sculpting hands, then that's going to limit my audience and my abilities and my knowledge of art in itself. So yeah.
I mean, your whole thing as a writer, you're not just a problem solver, you're a problem creator. So you're constantly coming up with problems, and you're constantly trying to figure out, do I solve these or do I let these linger? If I do solve it, how do I solve it? So it's more about all the questions that you're putting out there. When you give an answer, that answer ideally should spawn another question. So every time you have an answer that there's a definitive ending, and that's it, that you really got to make sure you know what you're doing right after that, because you just destroyed the momentum of the story. So you got to figure that out real fast, and you got to make sure that, is that what you want? Are you ending it right now? Because if you're ending it, okay. But if you're going to continue, you got to make sure, are you continuing this in a way that then feels like, okay, this is an organic flow to what's occurring here? Or is this just, you wrote yourself into a corner, and now you're kind of taking the cheap way out and saying, well, I'm the writer, I make my story however I want. Because that's... I've
like
seen
anyone
that,
saying something bad about King Cryptid, you're like, well, that's just King Cryptid, baby.
Yeah, this is how he is.
King Cryptid. It's just like, no, that's not gonna work, bro. That's the most horrible advice you could give yourself whenever you're creating something.
That's my thing. That's how I want to make it.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, what you're saying there, and this is obviously always a truth too, is that then that if it's not that person's thing, then they don't need to read it. So it's you really got to be understanding and careful about your approach as a creator. Now, you obviously shouldn't be just bending the knee to every single request, because some of them, if not, I'd say even most of them, will not make sense for the character and the story, especially at that point in time.
Yeah.
But if there's, a comment about the pacing, or a comment about the development, or a comment about, character consistency and motivation, and it's a deeper contextual critique, that's different. If it's just like wish fulfillment critique, that's, just go, oh, okay, cool.
It'd be so cool if he fought a dragon.
It's like, oh, well, I'll be like, well, issue 6, he does.
What do you know?
But, so it's a lot of different things, and again, that comes with the more that you do this kind of stuff, and you have to not just be patient with yourself, you got to be patient with the people reading, because sometimes there'll be, hey, well, what if this and that, happen, and you're probably thinking like, I kind of got a story that I want to do with that. And you got to decide, do I let the person know? Well, eventually that's kind of what's going to happen, or do you, stay secretive about that? Or that'll never happen, never in a million years, Do you let that person know, or do you just be like, oh, hey, thanks for the feedback. Appreciate you reading. So there's again, you're a storyteller. The biggest story you're telling is your own. So you got to figure out how you want to do that.
Yeah, and I think like even if someone's suggesting something wrong to your story or antithetical to it, it's only going like I never get mad or angry that people are asking me those questions because it's only solidifying my like belief in what I am doing. Like I have a reason why I'm not doing that.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
People are challenging. I wouldn't say challenging, but they're challenging my thought process and the reason that I'm writing it. And as long as I have an answer and I believe in it, and I'm not just making it up, obviously, but like that makes you. I think it helps you work out things and believe in your story even more. Whenever you get those like type of critiques.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, if anything, it shows that person is invested.
Oh yeah.
Because if they didn't care, they wouldn't even say anything.
So what would you suggest, like, because like you said, like people get into issue 3 and they're like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, would you suggest someone like write 5 issues, like at least like get 5 issues or something like that before before you just jump into something like comic books, because it's quite expensive. It takes very, very long time, and it's not the most lucrative thing as well. So like I see a lot of people like losing their shirt on creating something before actually analyzing what they're doing, or promising, oh, this is an ongoing series, and they stop at issue 2 because they didn't know what to do on issue 3. Like
I would honestly even say don't even think about writing a comic. Write just a story.
Yeah.
Just write a story, and then when you're done writing that story, write another story. It could be a couple pages. It doesn't have to be that long. Just just hit up on the story beats, the characters, and everything else, and just to get even used to the idea of writing.
Yeah,
'cause it's this kind of stuff it's like, I don't want to say that it's difficult or it's arduous, or make it out to be this, it's so crazy, no one could do this. No, anyone could do this. Anyone could do anything. It just depends. Are you willing to focus on it, commit yourself to learning as much as you possibly can, be honestly assessing what you're doing, be objective about your own work. Are you going to hold yourself to the same or higher standards than you would hold others to? So I see a lot of the time, I'm crapping on the big 2 and this and that. And then I look at what you're doing, and it's like, this is crap. This is worse. This is worse than what they're doing.
Right.
And so it's like, you got to make sure, criticize all you want and have a dissenting opinion as much as you want. But understand, bring that then to your own work. Don't then leave that dissenting voice and that critique somewhere else. Oh, no, well, I'm learning. I'm not going to critique myself. What did you listen to the first part? You said you're learning. All you should be doing is critiquing yourself. How else are you going to learn? You are forever learning. Newsflash.
Just in case you didn't know by now.
So it's like you're never like, no, I know everything. I am the greatest at all of this. Even this entire conversation tonight is experiential conversation. This isn't expertise conversation. This is all through. This is my experience. This is Spicer's experience. There's even things throughout the course of this conversation, I'm sure Spicer could say the same thing, that I'm like, I'm looking back and I'm like, I kind of learned that and this, and now I'm vocalizing that, some of it for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's, it's one of those things where we're always assessing what we're doing. And if you are not in that headspace, and if you're just about critiquing what others are doing all the time, I mean, another news flash, you're never going to get better. If you're just going to think that the more I critique someone else and I never actually work on my own stuff, I'm going to get better. No, you're not going to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so different, man. So different from critiquing and actually doing it. Like, writing's not... it's not the most difficult arduous thing in the world, but it is a very difficult thing to do very well. Like to get to hit all those beats, to do exactly what you want to do with your writing is by far very, very difficult. It's like, no, I want you to laugh here. Like, how many times does it actually work? You know, how many times you have to rewrite that joke? How many times you have to rewrite everything around it so that so that the joke hits? And are you willing to do that? Are you willing to throw everything away?
Because it's not what happens in that moment. Some people think, well, it's just the punchline. That's what makes it funny. No, it's all the setup.
Yes.
The punchline is just now the relief of the setup that you've built that tension up for. And it's the same thing that happens in horror. It's the same thing that happens in everything else. It's just tension and release.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing the proper build-up, if you're not having that proper setup, there is no punchline. Nothing. It's all going to fall flat. You know, like we were talking about before with the characters. If you're not building them up properly, whenever anything impactful happens that you think people are going to care, you're going to be really surprised when they're like, I could give a crap about this character.
Yeah,
like,
like,
and
oh,
you're
that
like,
happened?
Why? It's like,
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, it's because you've had a relationship within your own head with this character the whole time, but you didn't relay and communicate this to the reader through the story. So they didn't build a connection. So when something impactful happens, you know, you're going to be like, what do you mean? Like, you hated this character? Or sometimes it happens the opposite way, where you don't realize you've been building up this character the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And you've made them so popular with people. And then you hear, you know, you like this one instead? What? And it's like, what do you mean what? You built this character up the whole time.
Right. But yeah, it was like you were saying when you're like articulating things for the first time, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, you know, like whenever I was teaching, that's where I had like the biggest jump in my confidence of like what I was doing with my sculpture, because before I would just do things, and then students would ask me, well, why are you doing that? And I'd be like, well, that's a very good question. That's very good. Why am I doing this? And then you know instinctually, or you know intuitively, and then but you've never actually put it into a sentence that other people could benefit from. And I think whenever you're like, teaching's the best way to become to level yourself up to faster than like practicing every single day, because you have to really go in and analyze everything that you're doing, be able to articulate it and understand why
to break
it
it down
this way
for someone else.
Yeah, and if it's not working, you know, if someone's using it in the wrong way and it's not working, you know, with the amount of experience that you've had, you're able to be like, oh, you're pressing B instead of Z on the keyboard, you know, or whatever it is. And yeah, so like that type of teaching will help you more than anything. So if you learn anything, like I always try to have someone above me, try to have someone at the same level as me, and try to have someone below me in terms of their experience of whatever they're doing. So I'm learning from someone else, I'm discussing that with someone on my same level, and then I'm articulating and teaching that to someone beneath me. And you know, it's like lowering the ladder down,
that's
so that
great
everybody
advice.
else, you know, so everybody else can kind of climb up and get to this level. And by doing that, you're going to the next level yourself, you know. So yeah, it's good to have those three types of people around you as much as possible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%, man. That's I think that's a great spot to actually end the conversation.
Oh yeah, man, it's been a good one. It's been a good one. I appreciate you putting this together, man. Like I put streams together, and like just the thumbnail alone is like, it's like, oh god, I gotta put this thumbnail together. Oh my god, you know, like, so I appreciate you even doing that, man, and putting together for this show. And it's always a great conversation with you, Pete.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I wonder what are we gonna discuss on the third one?
Yeah, I've been studying up my ancient alien mythology knowledge, and you know,
we'll go
so
there.
we can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
I got some crazy ideas, so it'll be good.
Okay. All right. We'll go there then. Man, oh man. Thank you so much, man, for being here tonight. This was a great conversation. Everybody in the chat, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for being here too. Your questions, your comments are always great. They're always spot on. You guys are just awesome. I can't say enough kind things about you guys, but I sure as hell try. Tomorrow night, I'm not going to be on this channel. I'm going to be on the Alterna channel. We're going to be doing a closeout stream for Dave Lucarelli's Tinseltown Second Chance on his collected edition campaign, and also kind of like a delayed launch stream for the shirts and towels on the Alterna site. So we'll be doing that at 9 o'clock tomorrow, 9 o'clock Eastern. If you guys want to join, go to the Alterna Comics channel on YouTube. We'll be there. And other than that, I'll see you guys on Saturday. I'll be back here with Tyler Wentland, and we'll be having a deep dive of a conversation into some esoteric stuff. So
nice.
Yeah, that should be good. I wonder if he asked me like a month ago for a bunch of things. I had a great conversation about a month ago. I think it was with either it might have been with either True Believer or with Luke Aglietta. And the next day he's like, man, that was like the craziest conversation. It was so cool. He's like, you have like a list of like recommended reading and whatnot for me, and I'm like, yeah, here you go. So I'm wondering if he did anything.
He dove in. Yeah, let's see.
But thank you guys so much. Really, really, really appreciate you guys. And Spicer, thank you, man. Seriously.
Oh, hell yeah, man. I always love being here. It's great.
And Cole, it says, everything you guys talked about really confirmed that I'm going in the right direction. Well, I'm glad to hear that, man.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Find some, I got to get a link for my Discord, but yeah, like, I mean, we sit around and just talk about writing and all that stuff, anything creative, we're always there to help. So if you don't have anyone to bounce ideas off of, just reach out to me on Twitter, and I'll give you a link. And you're more than welcome to join us and pitch your story, do whatever you want to do. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, fantastic. Everybody, thank you guys again so much. I'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow night. If not, hopefully Saturday. And if not, well, everybody, have a great night and an even better tomorrow. I'll see you guys soon. Spicer, all the best to you, man. And everybody, take it easy. See you soon.
Have a good night.